Title: Bound in Ashes. Episode 1: The Alpha's Servant. They called her the daughter of an Alpha, but Lyanna Morrith was nothing more than a servant in her own home. Scrubbing the floors of the great hall with hands blistered raw, she listened to the laughter of her pack echo above her packmates who had never once seen her as one of their own. Born with Alpha blood yet chained like an Omega, her very existence was a curse. But tonight, before the full moon set, fate would shatter every chain and drag her into a destiny more terrifying than death itself. Stay with me, because what begins as humiliation will ignite into betrayal, forbidden power, and a love story scarred by tragedy. If you think you've heard every werewolf tale, this one will break you. Kindly subscribe to stay tuned and don't forget to turn on your notification bell. The night of the king's visit was supposed to be a celebration. Torches burned in gold sconces, tables overflowed with meat and wine, and the great hall pulsed with music. But Lyanna was not allowed to join. She moved like a shadow, carrying trays, pouring ale, ignored until someone needed to sneer. Her father, Alpha Raviel Dornath, watched her with eyes that burned with disappointment. To him, she was the mistake that had cost him respect among Alphas, the daughter born weak, with no wolf, no power. When she stumbled beneath the weight of a tray, the hall erupted in laughter. "Careful, little Omega," one warrior mocked, spilling wine across her arm. Lyanna bit down the fury that clawed in her chest. She had learned silence was safer than defiance. But then the doors boomed open. The air shifted. Every wolf fell to their knees. The Wolf King himself strode into the hall, his crown of black iron gleaming under torchlight. His gaze swept the crowd until it landed on her. Lyanna froze, breath caught, as the king's lips curved into a smile that chilled her to the bone. "Stand," the king commanded, his voice carried like thunder. "I have come for the daughter of Alpha Raviel." Murmurs rippled like fire across dry grass. The king advanced, stopping before Lyanna. He lifted her chin with a single finger, his eyes gleaming like a predator who had finally found prey. "This girl," he declared, "will be wed to Alpha Raviel Dornath. By my decree, she shall be his Luna." The hall gasped, plates clattered. Her father staggered, face pale with shame. Lyanna's heart hammered in disbelief. She, a servant, a mistake, a shadow, named Luna of the most ruthless Alpha in the kingdom? Her father fell to his knees. "My king, please, she is unworthy." "Silence," the king roared, his power silencing even the bravest wolves. "It is decided. She will leave tonight." Lyanna's hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to run, to beg for freedom. But before she could speak, soldiers seized her arms. Chains bit into her wrists. The hall blurred as she was dragged forward, her father watching with cold indifference. The king leaned close, his whisper sharp as a blade. "Pray, child, for Alpha Raviel is a wolf who does not forgive and never loves." The doors slammed shut behind her, cutting her off from the only life she'd ever known. And as the chains rattled around her wrists, Lyanna Morrith realized the cruel truth. She wasn't walking toward freedom. She was being delivered to her executioner. Episode 2: The Ruthless Alpha. The clatter of chains echoed against the stone walls as Lyanna was marched through the dark forest, the king's soldiers dragging her like a prisoner instead of a bride. The cold night air bit into her skin, rain beginning to fall in sharp needles. Her heart pounded with each step that carried her farther from everything she knew. But this was no journey of hope. She was being led into the den of a wolf who would rather see her bleed than wear his mark. Hours later, drenched and trembling, Lyanna was shoved through the iron gates of the Dornath pack. The fortress loomed like a beast in the storm, its towers jagged against the lightning, its walls crawling with armored guards. Wolves bowed their heads as their Alpha appeared, stepping into the rain like a shadow pulled from the earth itself. Raviel Dornath. He was nothing like she had imagined. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of obsidian and a presence that sucked the breath from her lungs. Power rolled off him in waves so heavy it made her knees weaken. But it wasn't his strength that chilled her. It was the contempt curling his lips as he looked at her. "So this is the king's decree," Raviel said coldly, circling her like prey. "The servant daughter of Alpha Theros, dressed in chains." His wolves laughed, their jeers cutting deeper than the storm. "Our Luna? An Omega slave?" Lyanna forced her chin up, though her body shook. "I did not ask for this." Raviel's eyes narrowed, his voice venom. "And I did not ask for you. Understand this, girl, by the king's word. I may be bound to you, but you will never be my true mate. I will never love you. I will never mark you, and you will never stand at my side as Luna." The words struck like claws across her chest, but she refused to bow her head. The mate bond pulsed faintly between them, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw a flicker of conflict in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came, smothered by his pride. He turned to his warriors. "Look well upon her. This is the king's puppet, not mine. She will have no claim to me, no seat at my table, no warmth under my roof." The storm howled louder, lightning flashing across his cruel smile. "Tonight," Raviel said, his voice carrying over the pack, "she sleeps where she belongs outside. Let her learn that in Dornath only the strong endure." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyanna's heart lurched. She opened her mouth to protest, but 2 guards seized her arms again, dragging her toward the gates. The doors slammed shut behind her, casting her into the raging storm. Rain soaked her to the bone as thunder cracked overhead. Alone, shivering, and despised by the mate who should have been her protector, Lyanna Morrith curled against the cold stone wall, unaware that something was already watching her from the shadows of the forest. Episode 3. The Broken Vow. The storm raged mercilessly, lightning clawing across the sky as Lyanna shivered against the stone walls of Raviel's fortress. Every raindrop stung like a blade, but worse than the cold was the knowledge that inside warm and dry her so-called mate laughed with his wolves. And yet, as the thunder rolled, she felt it, eyes burning into her from the tree line, a gaze too sharp, too focused, to belong to mere shadows. Someone was watching her. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving Lyanna fevered and weak. She was dragged inside the great hall, her hair clinging to her skin, her clothes tattered from the night. The Dornath pack gathered, filling the chamber with the heavy musk of wolves. At the center, Raviel stood like a carved obsidian statue, his eyes colder than the steel of his sword. "Listen well," Raviel said, his voice slicing through the silence. "By the king's decree she is here, but hear my vow and let it be carved into your memory. This is no true mating. This union is politics, nothing more. I will not claim her. I will not mark her. She will never bear my heir." The hall erupted in cruel laughter. Wolves whispered, sneered, some even spat in Lyanna's direction. Heat rose to her cheeks, not from shame, but from fury. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Then hear my vow, Alpha Raviel," she said, the title dripping like venom. "I will never bow to a man who cowers behind his pride. You may chain me, humiliate me, strip me of everything, but I will never be yours." A hush fell over the hall. No one dared speak to Raviel that way. His jaw tightened, the faint flicker of the mate bond sparking between them like fire on dry wood. His wolves looked on, eyes wide with disbelief, as if expecting him to tear her apart. In 2 strides, Raviel closed the space between them. His hand gripped her arm like iron, dragging her close. "Careful, girl," he growled, his breath hot against her ear. "Defiance in this pack has only one punishment." The bond surged between them, pain, heat, longing all tangled into one unbearable force. Lyanna gasped, the pull nearly dropping her to her knees. Her wolf, the one her father claimed she never had, clawed inside her chest, demanding freedom. Without thought, she lashed out. Her nails no. Her claws raked across Raviel's shoulder, slicing through leather and skin. Blood blossomed crimson against his black tunic. The hall went deathly silent. Raviel froze, staring at her in stunned disbelief, his blood dripping onto the stone floor. No one, no wolf had ever dared wound him. Gasps filled the air, some wolves snarling, others backing away as if lightning itself had struck. Lyanna's chest heaved, her hand still trembling from the strike. Raviel's eyes darkened, fury and something far more dangerous burning within them. The pack held its breath, waiting for his command. And in that razor-thin moment, one truth became clear. The bond between them wasn't just a curse, it was about to ignite a war. Episode 4, The King's Warning. Blood dripped down Raviel's arm, crimson against the black of his tunic. The hall was silent, every wolf frozen in disbelief. Lyanna's chest heaved, her claws still half extended, her body trembling from the shock of what she had done. She had struck her mate, her alpha, the unthinkable. But before Raviel could react, before punishment could fall, the air itself shifted. A new scent swept the hall, iron, smoke, and power. The king had arrived. The great doors boomed open, crashing against the stone walls. Soldiers in black armor stormed in, their boots hammering the floor. Behind them came the Wolf King, his presence a storm more dangerous than thunder. His gaze flicked from Raviel's bleeding shoulder to Lyanna's defiant stance. His lips curved not into a smile, but into something sharper, crueler. "So," the king said, voice dripping with venom. "The little Luna bears her claws." The pack dropped to their knees instantly, foreheads pressed to the floor. Raviel did not bow. He stood tall, jaw clenched, though the vein in his temple throbbed with fury. Lyanna remained standing too, though her knees wobbled under the weight of the king's power pressing against her chest like a blade. The king's eyes burned into them both. "I decreed this union for loyalty, for peace. And what do I find? Blood, rebellion, and a bond torn at the seams." He stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Hear me well. If you dishonor my decree, you will not only lose your titles, you will lose your lives. Both of you." His words coiled through the hall like venomous snakes. Raviel's fists tightened. Lyanna forced herself not to tremble. When the king left, the silence was deafening. Slowly, Raviel turned his head toward her, his eyes dark with barely restrained rage. He stepped closer, his voice low, meant for her alone. "This is your doing," he hissed. "Every chain around my neck, every threat of death, it is your fault. You are poison, Lyanna, and one day you'll choke on the fire you've lit." Lyanna's throat burned, but she refused to flinch. "Then burn with me, Raviel, because I will not break." The bond surged again, hot, painful, undeniable. The pack watched from the shadows, whispering as if waiting for blood to spill again. But Raviel released her arm with a shove and stormed away, leaving her standing alone in the center of the hall, her heart pounding against her ribs. That night, as the fortress grew quiet, Lyanna slipped into the courtyard to breathe beneath the pale moonlight. The air was cold, too still, and then she felt it, the same piercing gaze she had sensed in the storm. Her breath caught. Between the trees, just beyond the torchlight, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at her. A rogue wolf watching, waiting. Episode 5. Whispers of Betrayal. The glowing eyes didn't blink. They hovered just beyond the torchlight, sharp and deliberate, locked on her as though she were prey. Lyanna's breath caught in her throat, her body rigid with fear. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the eyes vanished into the night, swallowed by the forest. She pressed a trembling hand against her chest. Whoever that rogue wolf was, he wasn't hunting. He was watching, waiting. The following days were thick with silence and suspicion. Raviel avoided her, his cold glares sharper than blades whenever they crossed paths. The pack mocked her openly, whispering that their alpha would never claim her. But the rogue's glowing eyes haunted her every step, an unspoken warning she couldn't ignore. One night, restless and desperate for answers, Lyanna wandered into the west wing of the fortress. The halls were empty, the torches dim, the air heavy with secrets. She slipped inside Raviel's private study, a place no wolf dared enter without permission. The room smelled of smoke and leather. Maps littered the table, marked with red ink. Scrolls and letters were stacked high, sealed with black wax. Curiosity gnawed at her until she finally broke one open. Her pulse quickened as her eyes traced the words. It wasn't trade agreements. It wasn't orders from the king. It was rebellion. Letters from allied pacts, planning secret attacks, oaths written in blood to topple the throne. Her stomach churned. Raviel wasn't just defying the king's decree, he was plotting to overthrow him. And if the king discovered this, they'd both be executed. A floorboard creaked. Her head snapped up. The scent of smoke and steel filled her senses, a heartbeat before his voice cut through the silence. Looking for something? Raviel stood in the doorway, his eyes gleaming with fury. He moved toward her, each step deliberate, predatory. Lyanna's hands shook as she dropped the letter back onto the table. I wasn't... Don't lie to me. His voice was a growl, low and dangerous. In an instant, he closed the distance, slamming his palm against the wall beside her head. His other hand gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You dare snoop in my affairs? You dare touch what is mine? His fangs glinted in the firelight as he leaned closer, so close she could feel the heat of his breath. The air between them crackled, the mate bond surging like a live wire. Her pulse hammered, her defiance fighting against the trembling in her body. Maybe I was wrong about you, she whispered, breathless. Maybe you do fear me. For a heartbeat, Raviel froze. His eyes flicked to her lips, his chest rising and falling raggedly. The bond burned between them, pulling, demanding. His grip on her chin softened, the venom in his gaze shifting into something dangerous, something hungry. But then his jaw clenched, and with a snarl he slammed her harder against the wall, his fangs bared an inch from her throat. The room trembled with tension, his breath hot against her skin. Yet instead of striking, his lips hovered, so close to hers it was agony. Was he about to kill her? Or kiss her? Episode 6. The Rogue's Secret. Raviel's breath seared against her skin, his fangs bared, his lips hovering a whisper from hers. Lyanna's heart thundered as the bond flared, twisting pain into desire, fury into something far more dangerous. For a heartbeat, the fortress seemed to hold its breath. Then Raviel wrenched himself back, snarling as though burned by his own weakness. You are nothing, he spat, his voice raw, and nothing is all you'll ever be. He stormed out, leaving Lyanna trembling in the shadows of his study. But as the door slammed shut, another sound stirred in the darkness. A low growl, a rustle near the window. She spun, pulse racing only to find glowing eyes staring at her once again. The figure stepped from the shadows, a tall man with hair damp from the rain, his clothes ragged, his scent unmistakably wolf yet foreign to the Dornath pack. His eyes, sharp and golden, softened as they met hers. Lyanna. His voice cracked with something that sounded like relief. Her breath caught. That voice, she knew it. Faint memories flooded her mind. Laughter in the forest, a hand pulling her from danger, a promise whispered under the stars. Kaelin? He nodded once. It's me. Her knees nearly gave way. Kaelin, her childhood protector, her only friend before her father had declared him dead after a rogue ambush. She had mourned him, and yet here he stood alive. Tears stung her eyes. But how? They said you were gone. Gone to them? Kaelin said bitterly, but not gone from you. I've stayed hidden, waiting, watching. And when I saw you brought here in chains, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Lyanna's chest ached as he stepped closer. His hand brushed hers, grounding her. Listen to me, Lyanna. Raviel is poison. He will break you, use you, and when the king no longer needs you, He will let you burn with him. You have to leave this place before it's too late." The mate bond inside her flared in protest, a painful reminder of the tie she could not sever. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "The king bound me to him. If I run, it's death for both of us." Kaelin's jaw clenched, his eyes fierce. "Then let me protect you. Let me fight for you. I swore once I'd never let anyone hurt you, and I meant it." The warmth in his words, the familiarity of his presence threatened to undo her. For the first time since entering Dornath, she felt like more than a pawn. She felt seen, wanted. But the fragile moment shattered with the crash of a door. Raviel stood in the threshold of her chambers, his eyes blazing, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. His gaze swept from Lyanna's tear-streaked face to Kaelin's hand, still resting on hers. The air went razor-sharp with silence. Raviel's voice was low, deadly. "Step away from my Luna, or die where you stand." And with that, he drew his blade. Episode 7. Blood and ashes steel rang as Raviel's sword sliced through the air, its deadly edge gleaming in the torchlight. Kaelin's reflexes saved him. He twisted just in time, the blade nicking his arm instead of ending his life. The room erupted in chaos. Lyanna cried out, torn between her mate bond and the ghost from her past. "Run!" Kaelin barked, his voice sharp, commanding. And in a blur of motion, he leapt through the window into the storm, vanishing into the night. Raviel's gaze snapped back to Lyanna, fury burning hotter than fire. "What was he doing in your chambers?" Raviel dragged her by the wrist down the hall, his grip bruising, his silence heavier than iron. Servants whispered as they passed. Guards sneered. By the time they reached the grand hall, the pack had gathered, summoned by Raviel's command, eager for blood. He flung her into the center of the room. "Your Luna," Raviel's voice cut like ice, "welcomed a rogue into her chambers, a traitor, a spy. Tell me, should we not brand her the same?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lyanna stood, trembling, not from fear but from rage. Her bond burned inside her chest, binding her to a man who would see her humiliated before his wolves. "Answer me!" Raviel roared, his aura crashing over her like a storm. His wolves bowed under the weight of it, their heads lowering, their spines bending. But Lyanna did not bow. Something deep within her stirred a fire long buried, smothered under years of her father's scorn, her pack's cruelty, her own self-doubt. It rose now, raw and unyielding. Her voice cracked the silence. "I am no traitor, and I am no Omega." The air thickened. The wolves stared. Raviel's eyes narrowed. Lyanna lifted her chin, and when she spoke again, her words carried the force of command, the undeniable authority of alpha blood. "Kneel." The pack gasped as her aura slammed into the hall, invisible yet inescapable. One by one, wolves dropped to their knees, their bodies trembling, their eyes wide in shock. Even seasoned warriors gritted their teeth as their instincts betrayed them. Raviel's jaw tightened, his body straining against the pull. But even he felt the tug of her bloodline. His fury was a storm barely contained. Lyanna's chest heaved, her eyes glowing faintly. For the first time, she wasn't a servant. She wasn't a pawn. She was alpha-born, and every wolf in the room knew it. "You will not shame me," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Not before them, not before the king. If I am to be your Luna, then I will stand as one, and you will not break me." The hall fell into stunned silence, broken only by the pounding rain outside. Wolves exchanged glances, some fearful, others awed. Raviel's face was unreadable, caught between rage, respect, and something far more dangerous. Then, just as the weight of her words settled, the great doors creaked open. A familiar figure stepped into the hall, cloaked in arrogance and disdain. Lyanna's blood ran cold. Her father, the man who had raised her in chains, who had mocked her alpha blood as worthless. His lips curved into a serpent's smile as he surveyed the room. "I see," he drawled, his gaze sliding to Raviel, "that your Luna finally bares her fangs." Then, with a voice that dripped with venom, he added, "Perhaps it is time we discussed an alliance to bring you down, Alpha Raviel." Episode 8, Father's Bargain. The hall went deathly silent, every wolf straining to catch the words that dripped from Lyanna's father's tongue. His presence was venom wrapped in silk, his smile the kind that promised ruin. "I offer you a bargain, Alpha Dornath," he declared, striding boldly into Raviel's court as though he owned it. "Troops, arms, support. In exchange, you divorce my unworthy daughter and return her to me for punishment." Lyanna's breath caught. Punishment. She knew all too well what that meant. Chains, whips, silence. Her chest constricted, but her father's smirk only widened as his gaze met hers. "Keep watching, because what Raviel says next will ignite fury, fear, and a dangerous shift in the war for power. Hope you have subscribed and turned on the notification bell." Gasps rippled through the gathered pack. Warriors exchanged uneasy glances. To accept such an offer would be treachery, but to refuse could mean war with a powerful ally. Raviel's jaw flexed as he descended the dais, every step deliberate, his aura pressing heavy against the hall. He stopped just short of Lyanna's father, eyes narrowing. "You insult me," he growled. "In my court, before my pack." Her father chuckled darkly, undeterred. "Not insult, an opportunity. You don't want her. Everyone here can see it. She's soft, naive, dangerous only to herself. What you need is strength, Alpha. Armies. I can give you that, but only if you cast her aside." Lyanna's nails dug into her palms until blood pricked her skin. Her father's words sliced deeper than any blade, echoing years of degradation. And now, in front of Raviel's pack, he would reduce her to nothing more than a bargaining chip. The wolves stirred, murmurs rising. Some eyes lingered on Lyanna with pity, others with scorn. The humiliation pressed against her chest like a weight threatening to crush her. Raviel turned then, his gaze sweeping over his wolves, sharp, unyielding, the alpha who commanded respect through fear and ruthlessness. His next words would seal her fate. And then he spoke, his voice thunderous. "She is my Luna." Shock rippled through the hall. Her father blinked, taken aback for the first time. Raviel's eyes blazed with dark fire. "She will remain my Luna. Divorce? Never. She belongs to me." The pack erupted into howls of approval, their loyalty to their alpha surging. To them, Raviel's defiance was not for love, but for dominance. He would never bow even to his Luna's father. Lyanna's heart skipped, a strange mix of pride and confusion twisting inside her. For the first time, Raviel had defended her publicly, but as the wolves celebrated, she saw the storm still raging in his eyes. Her father's lips curled. "So be it. But remember this, Alpha Dornath. What you claim today will be the fire that consumes you tomorrow." With that, he turned and stalked from the hall, leaving behind a silence heavier than before. Raviel dismissed the pack with a gesture, his wolves dispersing reluctantly, still buzzing from the spectacle. When the last of them had gone, only he and Lyanna remained in the echoing chamber. His eyes found hers, cold and merciless. He stepped close, so close she could feel the ice of his words. "Don't mistake my defiance for loyalty," he whispered. "I didn't save you. I saved myself. To me, Lyanna, you're nothing but leverage. And one day, when I'm finished with you, you'll remember that truth." His words fell like a blade, sharper than any wound she'd ever endured, leaving her breathless and broken as he walked away. Episode 9, The Luna's Defiance. Raviel's words still cut into her long after he left, echoing like chains around her heart. "You're nothing but leverage." Lyanna sat in the empty hall, her fists trembling, her pride bleeding out onto the stone floor. For years she had been told she was nothing, For years she had swallowed that lie. But tonight, as the torches flickered low, she whispered a vow to herself. No more. If Raviel would not see her worth, then she would carve it out with her own hands. Night cloaked the fortress when she slipped away, her cloak drawn tight, her steps silent. The storm had passed, leaving the earth slick and the forest alive with mist. Every heartbeat screamed of risk. If Raviel caught her sneaking out after his warning, she might not live to regret it. Yet something stronger than fear pushed her forward. She followed the familiar pull until a figure emerged from the shadows. Kalen. His golden eyes softened as they met hers, though the scar along his cheek reminded her of the dangers he had faced in silence. You came, he said quietly, relief in his tone. I need to be more, she whispered. Stronger. If I'm only leveraged to Raviel, then I'll turn myself into a weapon he can't ignore. Kalen studied her, then nodded. Then I'll teach you. But understand this. Alpha blood isn't like other wolves. It will test you. It will break you if you're not ready. She raised her chin. Let it try. And so they began. Hours blurred as Kalen drilled her in silence, teaching her to command her aura, to force her will into the air until the trees themselves seemed to bend. She stumbled, fell, pushed herself up again. Sweat slicked her skin, her body trembling, but each time she rose with fiercer determination. Good, Kalen said, circling her. Again. Kneel. Say it with your chest, not just your lips. Lyanna inhaled sharply and let the fire surge. Her voice rang out, raw but powerful. The rogue wolves hidden in the shadows, Kalen's loyal allies, dropped to their knees in an instant. Lyanna gasped, astonished, the power humming through her veins like wildfire. But she wasn't alone. From the tree line, cloaked in shadows, Raviel stood, his arms crossed, his gaze sharp, his expression unreadable. He had followed her, perhaps expecting betrayal, but what he found was his Luna blazing with alpha fire. He should have stopped her, should have dragged her back to the fortress in chains. Instead, he remained silent, watching. The sight of her fierce, unyielding, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes alight with something primal, stirred something in him. He refused to name. Lyanna's knees buckled, the strain of her aura pulling at every muscle in her body. Kalen reached for her. Enough for tonight, you'll burn yourself out. But Lyanna shook him off, gritting her teeth. No, I need control. The power flared again, brighter, hotter, too much. Her chest seized, pain ripping through her veins as though her very blood rejected her. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her vision blurring. Then, with a strangled cry, Lyanna collapsed to the ground. Her body convulsed as if her alpha blood had turned against her, threatening to tear her apart. Kalen fell to his knees beside her, panic etched across his face. And from the shadows, Raviel stepped forward at last, his expression no longer cold, but something far more dangerous, conflicted fear. Episode 10. The Awakening. Lyanna's body convulsed violently, her veins burning as though fire itself had replaced her blood. Kalen's frantic hands pressed against her shoulders, but nothing stopped the tremors. Her eyes rolled back, her lips parted in a broken gasp. Then the ground shifted, an aura, ancient and raw, surged from her body in a shockwave that sent Kalen sprawling. And Raviel stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as if he'd expected this moment all along. Her breathing hitched, shallow and erratic. The raw, unbridled alpha energy crackled in the air, sparking against the trees like lightning. Kalen shouted her name, desperate, but his voice was swallowed by the storm of power radiating from her trembling body. Raviel knelt beside her, his hand steady though his gaze flickered with something dangerous: fear, fascination, desire. His palm hovered over her chest, hesitating, then pressed lightly against her heart. The mate bond sparked instantly, searing his touch. Lyanna gasped, her eyes flying open. They glowed, not the soft hue of a wolf's shift, but blazing silver fire. Her aura surged, colliding with Raviel's in an explosion of heat that forced the breath from both of them. Kalen staggered back, shielding his face as the sparks danced violently around the clearing. "Lyanna," Raviel growled, though his voice trembled against his will. "Control it, or it will consume you." Her body arched, her scream tearing through the night. Then, abruptly, the storm of energy collapsed inward. Lyanna stilled. Silence fell. When her breathing steadied, she opened her eyes again, still glowing faintly, but steadier now. The trembling had stopped. The weakness was gone. Instead, a raw strength pulsed in her veins, clearer than ever before. Every sound in the forest struck her ears with clarity. Every heartbeat the birds, the wolves, Kalen's rapid pulse, Raviel's controlled but quickened rhythm, thrummed inside her head. Her senses had sharpened tenfold. She sat up slowly, her gaze locking with Raviel's. His hand was still on her chest, the heat of his palm sinking into her skin. She should have pulled away. Instead, she pressed her hand over his, and the bond flared so violently that both of them flinched. Sparks literally crackled at their joined touch, the air charged as though the moon itself had descended between them. Kalen's face tightened, jealousy flashing in his eyes. But Raviel's expression was darker, conflicted, torn between pushing her away and pulling her closer. For one unbearable moment, the world shrank to the space between their locked gazes. Then Raviel ripped his hand back, standing abruptly. "You've changed," he muttered, his voice low and strained. "You're stronger now. But strength comes at a cost." Before Lyanna could answer, the sound of pounding hooves shattered the moment. A rider stormed into the clearing, a messenger clad in the king's colors. He dismounted, bowing quickly before thrusting a sealed scroll into Raviel's hands. Raviel broke the seal, his eyes scanning the words. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening until the parchment crumpled. He turned to Lyanna, his voice low, filled with barely leashed fury. "The king commands it. You are to bear me an heir within the year. If you fail, we both die." Episode 11, Bound by Flesh. The king's decree still echoed in the clearing like a death toll. Bear an heir within the year, or both will die. Lyanna's chest tightened, her breath faltering. But before the words could fully settle, Raviel tore the parchment in two, the pieces scattering like ash. His eyes blazed with fury. "I will not obey," he growled. "Not this. Not ever." Lyanna staggered to her feet, anger flaring as sharply as her new alpha blood. "Not obey?" she demanded, stepping toward him. "Raviel, this is the king's command. He holds both our lives in his hands. If you defy him, you don't just condemn yourself, you condemn me too." His jaw clenched, his voice a low snarl. "I would sooner burn than be forced into your bed. You were never meant to be mine." The words struck harder than claws, but instead of breaking her, they lit something inside. Her blood surged, her aura crackling against his like a storm. She shoved him in the chest, hard enough that his body jolted. "Then what would you prefer, Alpha?" she hissed. "Your grave dug early? Better your heir than your grave." The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. His wolves, had they been near, would not have dared to breathe. Raviel's eyes narrowed, dark fire smoldering in their depths. Lyanna's defiance, the very thing that should have disgusted him, drew him like a moth to flame. "You speak boldly for a Luna unwanted," he rasped, stepping closer. "And you hide behind your pride like a coward," she shot back. "Is it fear that keeps you from me, Raviel? Or something worse, you're afraid that once you touch me, you won't be able to stop?" His aura slammed against hers, their bond sparking violently. The air thickened, charged, until even the trees seemed to bow beneath it. She could feel his heartbeat pounding through the tether that chained them, could smell the battle raging in him, hate and hunger, rage and desire. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her flush against his chest. The heat of him was unbearable, searing through her skin. His breath ghosted over her ear, rough and uneven. "Careful, Lyanna," he whispered. "You're playing with fire you can't control." But she didn't back down. "Then burn with me." The bond roared to life, a violent surge that bent their wills. Raviel's head dipped, his lips grazing her throat, teeth dragging along the place where a mate's mark would be. Sparks exploded in her veins, her body trembling between fear and craving. For one heartbeat he yielded, his fangs grazing her skin, his grip tightening as if he might finally claim her. But then he froze. With a guttural snarl, Raviel ripped himself away, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with a war he couldn't win. "No," he rasped, his voice breaking. "I will not mark you. I will never mark you." And with that he turned his back to her, leaving her trembling in the darkness, marked not by his teeth, but by the wound of what he almost did. Episode 12. The Assassin's Bite. The night was colder without him. Raviel's words, "I will never mark you," still cut deep, leaving Lyanna hollow and trembling in the echo of what almost was. Yet dawn came regardless, and with it, the hunt. A chance, Raviel had declared, for her to prove she was no fragile Luna. But sometimes the forest does not test. It kills. The morning mist clung to the earth as Raviel's pack fanned out, wolves shifting into sleek beasts, their eyes gleaming. Lyanna rode at the center, her bow strapped across her back, her wolf restless beneath her skin. Raviel's presence burned beside her, silent and unreadable, his aura pressing against hers like a constant reminder of chains and sparks both. For a while it was almost peaceful, the thrill of the chase, the rush of wind, the unity of the pack. Then the air shifted. A stench, bitter and wrong, cut through the forest. Lyanna's wolf bristled. She turned too late. A shadow exploded from the undergrowth, a massive wolf, eyes glowing with murderous intent. Its fangs sank into her shoulder before she could react. Pain ripped through her, white hot, searing her nerves. She cried out, stumbling as blood poured down her arm. The pack howled in chaos, wolves circling. But the assassin was no ordinary wolf. He moved with precision, his strikes aimed not to wound but to kill. He lunged again, claws raking her side. Lyanna fell hard, her vision blurring as her alpha blood surged, desperate to heal what her body could not. The attacker snarled, looming above her for the final strike. And then Raviel was there. He hit the wolf with such ferocity that the ground shook, his shift mid-leap, his body transforming into his massive beast form. He tore into the assassin with a savagery that silenced even his pack. Flesh ripped, bones cracked, the forest filled with the sound of brutal, merciless killing. Lyanna, half-conscious, watched through hazy eyes as Raviel's wolf pinned the assassin, fangs crushing the life from his throat. Blood drenched his muzzle, his growl primal, terrifying, and yet for the first time she did not fear him. She felt protected, claimed. The assassin gurgled, broken, but with his last breath he forced words through his torn throat. His gaze locked not on Lyanna, but on Raviel. "Your mate," he rasped, choking on blood, "will be your doom, Alpha." Then his body went limp, silence crashing over the forest as his blood pooled into the earth. Raviel froze above him, those dying words echoing like a prophecy neither he nor Lyanna could ignore. Episode 13. The Wolf King's Demand. The words clung to the air like smoke. "Your mate will be your doom, Alpha." The forest had never felt so silent. The pack stared at their Alpha and his bleeding Luna, fear rippling through them like a disease. Raviel's jaw clenched, his golden eyes burning with something Lyanna could not read. Rage. Yes, but deeper. Fear. But fear was dangerous, because fear invited the king. The assassin's body was dragged away, but his words refused to die. That night the pack murmured in hushed voices, suspicion gnawing at the edges of their loyalty. Lyanna's wounds ached, her wolf restless. Raviel had not spoken a word to her since the fight only carried her back to the stronghold with silent iron arms, his jaw locked as if every word might break him. By dawn, a horn shattered the morning. A royal banner crested the hills. The Wolf King had come. The throne room filled with the scent of steel and tension as the king strode in, his cloak dragging across the stone. His eyes, sharp and cruel, swept over the gathered pack before landing on Raviel. "Assassins in your forests, whispers of disloyalty, rebels moving in shadows," the king sneered. "Do you play me for a fool, Raviel?" The Alpha bowed stiffly, his wolf straining beneath his skin. "I play no games, my king. The attack was not mine." But the king's attention was already shifting, like a predator finding softer prey. His gaze slid to Lyanna, and a slow, mocking smile curved his lips. "So this is the bride fate has forced upon you," he murmured, circling her as though she were a treasure on display. Radiant, fierce, a Luna worthy of powers and far too good for chains. His hand brushed against hers, bold, deliberate. Lyanna stiffened, her instincts screaming. Raviel growled low in his throat, stepping forward, but the king only laughed. "What is this? Jealousy, Alpha? Or are you afraid your Luna might discover she deserves a real throne?" The court stirred, whispers rising like sparks. Raviel's hands curled into fists, the bond between him and Lyanna pulsing with anger and something darker possession. Lyanna forced herself to meet the king's gaze, her own voice steady. "I am bound where I am meant to be." The king's smile widened, wolfish. "Ah, loyalty. Such a rare jewel. Tell me, Raviel, how long until you break it?" Tension crackled in the air. Raviel's silence only fed the fire. The king leaned closer, lowering his voice so that only Lyanna could hear, his breath hot against her ear. "Careful, little Luna," he whispered silkily. "Your mate plans to murder you before the year is done." Lyanna froze, her heart pounding, as the king's poisonous words sank in, while Raviel's furious eyes burned from across the throne room. Episode 14, The Forbidden Kiss. Your mate plans to murder you before the year is done. The king's poison still clung to her skin as he swept from the hall, leaving silence in his wake. Lyanna's heart hammered, her eyes darting to Raviel. His fury blazed across the throne room, a storm held barely in check, but she couldn't shake the whisper lodged in her soul. Was the king lying? Or had he spoken a truth Raviel dared not deny? The moment the king left, Raviel strode across the chamber, his presence overwhelming, his wolf barely restrained. The pack had already scattered, whispering about the king's bold flirtation, about Raviel's silence, about Lyanna caught in the center. "What did he say to you?" Raviel growled, cornering her against the cold stone wall, his golden eyes burning into hers. Lyanna lifted her chin, refusing to flinch. "Why don't you tell me, Alpha? Am I to watch my back now, even in my mate's house?" Raviel's nostrils flared. "You dare believe his lies?" Her voice cracked with defiance. "You've given me nothing but reason to doubt you. You swore never to love me, never to mark me, never to claim me. Tell me, Raviel, why should I trust you not to destroy me too?" The bond between them flared violently, a heat that seared bone and blood alike. Raviel's hand slammed the wall beside her head, his breath ragged. "Because if I wanted you dead, Lyanna Morrith, you'd already be lying at my feet." But his voice trembled, betraying something else, something neither of them dared name. The air thickened. The storm outside rattled the castle windows, thunder rolling as if the skies mirrored the tempest inside them. Lyanna's lips parted, words lost. Raviel's gaze fell to her mouth, lingering, betraying every denial he had ever spoken. The bond snapped taut. One step, one breath. His hand cupped her face before either of them could stop it, rough and desperate, and his mouth crashed against hers. The kiss was fire, raw, dangerous, forbidden. His lips claimed her with fury, hers answering with equal defiance, as though they could burn away every chain, every decree, every whispered lie with this single act. The bond roared, sparks tearing through their skin where they touched. And then just as suddenly, they broke apart, panting, horrified at themselves. Raviel staggered back as though burned, his chest heaving. This cannot happen, he rasped, voice torn between rage and longing. Lyanna's hand trembled at her lips, her wolf howling inside her. Then why did it? Neither had an answer. A sharp gasp echoed from the shadows. Both turned too late. Kalen stood in the doorway, his eyes blazing with betrayal and fury. "I swore to protect you, Lyanna," he said, his voice low, dangerous. "And now I know from him." His vow hung like a blade between them, and the bond that had nearly consumed them turned instantly into a weapon that could shatter everything. Episode 15. The Betrayer's Oath. Kalen's words cut through the storm like steel, and now I know from him. His gaze flicked from Lyanna's trembling lips to Raviel's clenched fists, and in that silence, a line was drawn in blood. Raviel growled, stepping forward, his wolf bristling. "You dare spy on me, rogue?" Kalen didn't flinch. His eyes never left Lyanna's, his voice steady despite the Alpha's fury. "Not spy, protect. You may fool your pack with talk of alliances, Raviel Dornath, but I see through you. You will destroy her." Lyanna's pulse quickened. "Kalen." He cut her off, stepping closer, his tone softer now, meant for her alone. "He hides things from you, Lyanna. I know because I've seen them. Letters, plans. Raviel doesn't just despise the king, he plots to tear down the crown itself. And when he does, you will be nothing but a pawn, a casualty in his war." The revelation struck her harder than a blow. The rebellion rumors, the secret parchments she had glimpsed. Could Kalen be telling the truth? Raviel's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing dangerously. "Lies," he spat. But even his denial carried cracks. Kalen stepped closer still, his voice fierce. "Run with me. Leave this cursed bond behind. Before it consumes you. Before it kills you. Before he does." His hand brushed hers, tender, pleading. "Lyanna, I swore to protect you, even from him." Her heart twisted. The bond between her and Raviel burned in her chest, undeniable, pulling her toward the Alpha who swore never to love her, yet whose kiss had set her soul ablaze. And here stood Kalen, her childhood protector, offering safety, offering escape, offering loyalty that asked for nothing in return. Tears pricked her eyes. "Kalen, I can't. I don't know what Raviel hides, but I won't abandon him. Not like this." Raviel's breath hitched, surprise flickering in his eyes for the briefest second, though he masked it quickly with rage. Kalen's face hardened. "So you choose your chains?" he whispered bitterly. "Then I have no choice but to break them myself." The tension snapped like a bowstring. Raviel lunged, seizing Kalen by the throat, his claws half bared. "Traitor!" His roar shook the walls. "You dare spread poison in my house?" The guards rushed in at the sound, their spears raised, their eyes flicking uncertainly between Alpha and Rogue. Lyanna's scream pierced the chaos. "Stop! Please!" But her words were drowned in Raviel's fury. "Take him!" Raviel commanded, his voice cold, final. "At dawn, Kalen dies for his betrayal." The guards dragged Kalen from the chamber as he locked eyes with Lyanna one last time, silent but unyielding. His vow still echoed in her ears. "I swore to protect you, even from him." And as the door slammed shut, Lyanna felt the world tilt, torn between two oaths, one of loyalty, the other of betrayal. Episode 16. Blood on the Moon. At dawn, Kalen dies for his betrayal. The Alpha's decree rang through the stronghold like a death knell. Lyanna's chest constricted, her wolf howling against the cage of her ribs. Could she really stand by while her childhood protector, her only constant in a world of chains, was dragged to the execution block? Consequences will tear the pack apart. The hours until dawn stretched endlessly, each one heavier than the last. Lyanna could not sleep. She paced her chambers, Kaelin's words echoing in her skull. I swore to protect you even from him. When the horn finally sounded, summoning the pack to the courtyard, her decision had already been made. The square was alive with cruel anticipation. Torches blazed against the crimson glow of a rising blood moon. Wolves jeered and muttered as Kaelin was dragged forward, chains binding his hands, his defiant eyes never leaving Lyanna even as soldiers forced him to his knees. Raviel stood on the dais, his golden eyes cold, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. This traitor dared to conspire against me, against our pack, he declared, his voice thunderous. For this crime, he will die. The crowd roared in agreement. Death! Death! Lyanna's nails dug into her palms until they bled. Her heart hammered, the bond tugging at her, screaming at her to stay silent, to obey. But she couldn't. No! Her voice rang clear, silencing the courtyard. She stepped forward, her gown trailing like shadow, her wolf flaring inside her. You will not kill him, Raviel. The pack gasped. Even Kaelin's breath caught. Raviel's head snapped toward her, fury blazing. You dare defy me before my pack? Lyanna lifted her chin, her alpha blood surging. I dare because I am Luna, and I say his blood will not stain this night. Murmurs erupted through the crowd. Then, like wildfire, chants rose. Exile her. Exile the false Luna. The air grew dangerous. Wolves bared teeth, some snarling openly at her. The bond between her and Raviel burned, wild and unstable, demanding she bow or break. Raviel's wolf surged forward, barely contained, his power rolling off him like thunder. For a heartbeat, Lyanna thought he would tear her apart himself. But then he did the unthinkable. Raviel strode down from the dais, seizing her wrist with a grip like iron. The crowd hushed instantly, his eyes locked on hers, a storm of rage and something darker. You want to stand against me? Then you will stand as mine. Before she could resist, his head dipped to her throat. His fangs pierced her skin before all the pack. Raviel marked her, binding her with the mate bond irrevocably. The crowd erupted into stunned silence, then frenzied howls. Lyanna staggered, her wolf screaming at the sudden flood of fire and bond. Kaelin's eyes widened with horror as Raviel's voice thundered above the chaos. Defy her now, and you defy your Luna. Episode 17. Marked in Chains. Lyanna's scream tore through the courtyard as Raviel's fangs sank into her skin, the mark searing like fire straight into her soul. The crowd howled their approval, the pack bowing to their alpha's will. But Lyanna staggered in his arms, every breath tangled in agony and fire. The bond was alive now, burning, binding, undeniable. The blood moon glared down on them, casting the stronghold in crimson light. Raviel's wolf howled through him, satisfied, triumphant, yet his chest heaved as though he too had been burned. Lyanna shoved him back, her hand pressed to the bleeding mark on her neck, her eyes blazing with fury. You had no right, she spat, her voice raw with betrayal. Raviel's jaw tightened, his golden eyes unreadable. I had every right. You are mine, and now no one can question it. The words only twisted the knife deeper. The bond surged between them, pulling, clawing, demanding closeness even as she recoiled. Her wolf strained toward him, desperate for the touch her heart despised. It was torture, being dragged between love and loathing, between fire and chains. Kaelin, still kneeling in chains, stared in horror. Lyanna. His voice cracked with despair, but the guard silenced him with a blow. That night, in the solitude of her chambers, Lyanna felt the bond's torment in full. Every breath Raviel took, she felt. Every flicker of his rage, every ripple of his desire pulsed through her veins like poison and wine. She pressed her fists against her chest, tears burning. When the door slammed open, Raviel stood there, his own torment written in the tightness of his features. The mark binds us. Neither of us can fight it now. She glared at him, though her heart betrayed her. hammering at his nearness. "You think this makes me yours? You've only made me your prisoner." Raviel's hand trembled as if he wanted to reach for her but dared not. "Better prisoner than corpse. They would have torn you apart. I did what I had to do." Her voice broke. "No, Raviel. You did what you wanted." Silence thickened, the bond sparking violently between them. For a moment it seemed he would kiss her again, claim her fully, surrender to the fire that now chained them both. But before either could move, a horn shattered the night. The council chamber doors burst open. A messenger, bloodied and breathless, fell to his knees before them. "Alpha, Luna, the king's armies march. He calls you traitor, Raviel Dornath. For defying his command, for binding your Luna without his leave, the king declares war." The words struck like lightning. War drums echoed faintly in the distance, carried by the night wind, and Lyanna's marked neck burned hotter, as if the bond itself foresaw blood. And for the first time, Raviel's mask cracked, his voice low, almost a whisper. "He means to burn us all." Episode 18, Love in the Ruins. "He means to burn us all." Raviel's voice still echoed in Lyanna's ears as the first war horns wailed across the horizon. Fire bloomed on the hills where the king's armies advanced, their banners clawing the night sky. The stronghold quaked with fear, and for the first time since her forced mating began, Lyanna felt no hesitation. This was her fight too. The king's wolves struck at dawn. The stronghold erupted in chaos, steel clashing against fangs, cries of rage splitting the air. Raviel's pack poured into the battlefield, their howls defiant against the tide of royal soldiers. Lyanna stood at Raviel's side, her wolf burning beneath her skin. When an enemy lunged at her, claws bared, she didn't flinch. Her wolf surged free, golden fire in her eyes, her strength ignited by the alpha blood she had long suppressed. With one strike, she sent the soldier sprawling. Raviel's head snapped toward her, stunned but only for a heartbeat. Then a dark pride lit his face and he fought harder, fiercer with her at his side. The bond pulsed with each clash of steel, every shared breath, every brush of their shoulders as they fought back to back. For the first time, they moved as one, Alpha and Luna, no longer bound by contract or resentment, but by something rawer, real. The battle raged on, flames consuming the stronghold walls. Lyanna's gown was torn, blood streaking her arms, but she stood tall, fearless, striking down foe after foe. Raviel's growls carried over the din, each one more desperate, more protective, as if the war was just an excuse to keep her alive. When the tide threatened to overwhelm them, Lyanna grabbed his arm, her voice fierce over the roar of war. "We will not break, Raviel. Not now, not ever." Something in him shattered. In the middle of the chaos, amidst blood and fire, he seized her face with bloodied hands. His golden eyes burned with truth he could no longer deny. "I was a fool to resist you," he rasped. "Lyanna, I love you." The words tore through her, fiercer than any blade. Tears burned her eyes, but her lips curved in a fierce, trembling smile. "Then fight with me, to the end." And fight they did. Together, they carved a path through the king's soldiers, their wolves howling in unison, a storm of power that left enemies trembling. The pack, seeing their Alpha and Luna united at last, rallied with renewed fury. It felt, for a fleeting, blazing moment, that they might win. But fate is cruel. As Raviel turned to strike down a soldier lunging for Lyanna, a sharp whistle cut through the air. She barely saw it before it struck. An arrow, black-feathered, sinking deep into Raviel's chest. His eyes widened, golden fire dimming, blood staining his lips as he staggered. The bond between them screamed in agony, ripping through Lyanna's soul. "Raviel," she screamed, catching him as the battlefield blurred around them. And as he fell against her, the king's banner loomed through the smoke, advancing without mercy. Episode 19, The Last Embrace. "Raviel." Lyanna's scream tore through the smoke as his weight sagged against her. The black feathered arrow jutted from his chest, crimson blooming across his armor. Around them the battlefield raged, but for Lyanna, the world shrank to the shallow, rattling breaths of the man who had once sworn never to love her, yet had just confessed everything. Lyanna cradled him in her lap, her hands pressing desperately against the wound, but the blood flowed too fast, too hot, staining her fingers red. The bond burned like wildfire, tethering her soul to his as it unraveled strand by strand. His golden eyes, dimming, found hers. His lips curved faintly, a ghost of his usual arrogance now stripped bare. "Lyanna, don't cry." She shook her head violently, tears streaking down her blood-smeared cheeks. "Don't you dare leave me. We just—" Her voice broke. "You can't take those words back now." Raviel coughed, blood trailing from his mouth, his hand rising to cup her face with trembling fingers. "I would give anything to take back every cruel word I ever spoke, but there's no time left." His gaze hardened, even through the pain. "Listen to me. You must live. Lead them. The pack needs you, Luna." Her wolf wailed inside her, torn between duty and devastation. She pressed her forehead to his, sobbing. "No, don't ask this of me. I cannot live in a world without you, Raviel. You are my bond, my fire, my curse, and my love." The battle noise dimmed in her ears. It didn't matter that soldiers still clashed around them, that the king's army pressed closer. All that mattered was the dying Alpha in her arms, the man she had hated, defied, loved against all reason. Raviel's grip on her wrist faltered. His eyes fluttered, his voice little more than a whisper. "Promise me, Lyanna, promise me you'll survive." Her tears fell onto his lips as she shook her head. "I promise nothing." The bond screamed, splitting apart as his life ebbed. Desperation surged through her veins, wild and merciless. She kissed him then, fiercely, hungrily, as though she could breathe her soul into him, as though she could bind him to her through sheer will. Their last kiss burned hotter than any flame, sealing a love that had bloomed too late. When she pulled back, her decision was already carved into her heart. Her hand slid to the dagger at her waist. "If you go, I go." Before Raviel could protest, before the bond could shatter completely, Lyanna plunged the blade into her own heart, blood spilling into his arms as darkness closed in. The battlefield roared on, but for the Alpha and Luna bound in tragedy, the world ended in silence. Episode 20. Bound in Ashes. The dagger slipped from Lyanna's hand as her body went limp over Raviel's chest. Blood mingled with blood, mate bond unraveling in one last flare of light before silence consumed it. For a moment, the battlefield itself seemed to hold its breath, warriors frozen as if the moon had demanded witness to the tragedy. Stay with me, because legends are not born in triumph, but in sacrifice, and tonight an Alpha and his Luna carve their names into eternity. A hush fell across the field. Even the clash of steel stilled. Even the snarls of wolves broke into silence as eyes turned toward the fallen pair. Raviel, the ruthless Alpha feared across kingdoms, lay dead. Lyanna, the defiant Luna who had refused to bow, had chosen to follow him into the abyss. Their bodies remained locked in one final embrace, crimson spreading like dark petals beneath them. The king's banner trembled as his soldiers faltered, shaken by what they had witnessed. But it was not the king's wrath that filled the night, it was the howling grief of Raviel's pack. One by one, wolves lifted their heads to the sky, unleashing a chorus of mourning that tore through the heavens. The sound was raw, unyielding, the song of a bond severed too soon. Kalen pushed through the carnage, his face ashen, his eyes blazing with a grief that cut deeper than any blade. He dropped to his knees beside them, trembling hands brushing blood-matted hair from Lyanna's face. "Foolish girl," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You swore to live. Yet you chose him even in death." Tears streaked his cheeks as he rose, lifting their entwined bodies into his arms. Blood dripped down his armor, but he carried them with the reverence of a priest bearing holy relics. The pack parted, silent, their heads bowed. No one dared stop him. Step by step, Kalen walked through the battlefield, the broken Alpha and Luna cradled against his chest. He carried them to the moon altar that stood beyond the ridge, ancient stone glowing faintly under the silver gaze of the goddess. There, he laid them down together, their hands still clasped, their foreheads touching. The pack gathered, their grief transforming into something deeper, heavier, faith. Kalen raised his voice, cracked yet resolute. They were not traitors. They were not weak. They were martyrs. Bound by blood, duty, and love, they gave everything for us. The wolves bowed, some weeping, others howling again, their lament carrying to the stars. For centuries to come, that night would be remembered not as the fall of an Alpha, but as the birth of a legend. As the moonlight bathed their bodies, a wind swept through the altar, carrying the faint echo of a bond that refused to die. Their hands, entwined even in death, seemed to glow faintly, two lovers frozen in eternity, bound in ashes beneath the gaze of the eternal moon. Episode 21. The Prophecy's End. The altar glowed pale silver, bathing the entwined bodies of Raviel and Lyanna in a holy stillness. Wolves still howled their grief, the sound carrying across valleys, through forests, and into the night sky itself. Yet far beyond the grieving pack, hidden in the shadows of a ridge, a darker presence lingered, watching, waiting, savoring. The king stood cloaked in black, his crown glinting faintly beneath the moonlight. He had not joined the battle, had not dirtied his hands in blood. He had watched, patient, calculating. His soldiers, victorious in numbers, stood at bay, unsure whether to advance or retreat in the face of the wolves' unyielding mourning. The king's eyes, sharp as a predator's, never wavered from the altar where Lyanna and Raviel lay. He had heard the chants, the howls, the declaration of martyrdom. He had seen Kalen lift them as though lifting saints. But where the pack saw sacrifice, the king saw strategy fulfilled. His lips curved into a thin, venomous smile. So, he whispered into the cold night air, his voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. The prophecy is fulfilled. 2 flames extinguished, so my reign may endure. His words lingered like poison on the wind. The prophecy, ancient, secret, carved into stone long before his reign, had foretold of a bond that could rival the throne itself. When the Alpha of ash and the Luna of blood unite, kingdoms will tremble and kings will fall. The king had feared it once. Now he relished its end. For with both dead, no bond could rise to challenge him, no love strong enough to break his crown. But as he turned to leave, a shiver ran down his spine. The altar glowed faintly brighter, the entwined hands of Raviel and Lyanna pulsing with a dying spark. It was fleeting, barely there, a whisper of power refusing to die. The king froze, his smile faltering. For the briefest moment he thought he heard voices, hers, defiant, and his unyielding, woven together in a vow that transcended death. Then silence returned. The spark vanished, yet unease gnawed at the king's heart. He pulled his cloak tighter and descended into the shadows, muttering to himself, "No flame ever truly dies. But if it flickers again, I will be ready." Behind him, at the altar, the wind carried a ghostly echo of a howl, low, mournful, and eternal. The pack mourned, but the moon alone bore witness to the truth. The prophecy had not ended. It had only begun.